My name is Nixon Lewis. I'm from Sandy Bay. I'm the siblings of 5. I have 1 brother and 3 sisters. My mom name is Lita Lewis and my dad is Azzy Lewis. Right. They are direct descendants of Garifuna people, the Carib people as the Spanish call, but our people call ourselves the Kalinago people. Right. The Kalinago people actually, they're a story of a set of people that came from the Orinoco Basin in the Orinoco River, and they had sailed down the Orinoco River and up the Caribbean Sea in somewhere between the 12th and 13th century. They actually were looking for more greener pastures, for food and a better way of life. Because of the warring faction within the Orinoco Basin, they keep moving. The people who were seafaring people, so they keep moving. But they actually came about, the Carib people, you know, they actually were the first and original people who actually gave birth to the Garifuna people. And by me saying this, is the story goes on. The journey of the Garifuna people is something that I also teach in London too. And the story that as we put together pieces is that in the 13th century, there were a group of African people who were traveling from Mali. Okay, they actually, I can't exactly remember the king name now, but he actually put an expedition of 2,000 canoes traveling from Mali to the west. And they actually came down to the Atlantic and to the Caribbean, where they mingle and meet with the Carib people, the Kalinago people. And they actually born a new race of people, the Garifuna people, who actually live among with the Kalinago people, which the Spanish call Carib, really, because it was a term for cannibalism. The word Carib in Spanish really meaning cannibalism, eating people and that kind of stuff and things. So actually, you know, as the story unfolds itself, by putting pieces together from story told by other people, you know, it's a story that is very intriguing, and anybody who come across this story, they have an instant rush for more of that story. It's not just a story that when you hear the story that you want to stop there. It's a story that draws you into it. Right? The story joins lots of people.
Okay, got it. Now today there's a lot of discussion. First of all,
okay, that one was leaking. The truck was not broken. All right.
okay. Let me hear this.
Susanna,
She's outside.
Rod, Guerra mat. A little bit distracting right now too.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. So, you know, there's some discussion these days about whether to use the word, or I know there's confusion about using the word Black Carib, Kalinago, Garifuna. I hear all 4 words, and I know that it's confusing to me. So is it confusing to you?
Well, lots of people would find it very confusing because of the fact that, you know, to get to the story and the truth of the story, you would find lots of different myths and different story from other lines of people. You would have the British version, you would hear the French version, and you would hear the island people itself version. And between these versions, you would hear the name, the Black Caribs, you would hear the Caribs, you would hear the Kalinago, and you would hear the Garifuna. You know, but all basically meaning the same people. You understand? It's just that the birth of another from one, which is the Garifuna from the Kalinago, from both African and Kalinago people. You know?
So what do you call yourself when you talk to people outside? Hello, I'm.
Okay. Me, I am, you know, Columbus, the Spanish, they say Carib. You say Carib, I know it's related to me. You say Garifuna, I know it's related to me. You say Kalinago, I know it's related to me. Because I am basically the first, you know, the Carib people or the Kalinago people were the first. Then the African and the Kalinago became the Garifuna. And then the Garifuna, you know, they live among the Kalinago people, so they were the Kalinago. But the people who have the concept coming in, and when they come into the island, there were lots of scholars who basically were doing the thesis in London. And some of them have never come to the Caribbean before. They were doing history theses, and they would write in the thesis the Black Caribs, because the color of the skin was a little bit higher brown than the Kalinago. And then the Spanish would write the Caribs, meaning they are cannibals, they're eating people and things like that. And so the Spanish version would carry the Caribs, which the English later call the Charibs, which spell as Charibe, and then the Spanish somewhere along the line Carib, the Carib, you know. And they all tells a story. They tells a story of these people, but everybody who tell this story, they find a name, because they didn't know how to relate to them or how to identify them as such. So if I was doing my thesis and I said the Black Carib, immediately my thesis will have story about the Black Carib. And when another student go and study my thesis and take my thesis, they can continue with that, the Black Caribs. On the Spanish side, they would have the Caribs, you know.
So when you were growing up, how were you referred to?
Well, we were referred to as the Caribs in a very derogative way. The Caribs, they were cannibals, they were warlike, they were stupid, they all names of evil we were being called. I guess that was a teaching that was deliberately by the British, really, I would say, you know, because of the fact that our country was then colonialized by the British. The teachings that were teaching in school were from the British perspective, and many of the history that they were teaching was that, you know, along the lines they were portraying heroes like Christopher Columbus, John Hawkins, and lots of those pirates. They were portraying those as heroes, you know, while on the other hand, they were portraying the black people who were living among us as slaves. They came from Africa, and they were slaves on the plantation. And on one other hand, they were teaching that the Caribs were cannibal, and they were warlike, and they were fierce people.
Okay, so when you were in school as a child, did you learn anything in school about being about your history, personal history? So please tell me what you learned about yourself as a child. What
we learned basically was from the British perspective, and you know, it's sad that lots of our own teachers, even our own Garifuna, Kalinago people who were teachers, were actually teaching us that we Kalinago Carib people were cannibals, we were fierce, we were warlike, you know, to that extent. And most of them were teaching us is that, okay, we had fought against the British and we has lose the war, and, you know, little and no history concerning the struggles and the fight and the resistance of the Kalinago people. Really. We were more teach, okay, we were more teach about slavery and the plantation ship and the coming of people from Africa and ships, packed as sardine, and John Hawkins, the great pirates and the buccaneers and those kind of stories. There were no extent story to our own people and the significant and the struggles and the fight that they put up and the resistance against these people which we call the colonial masters. You know.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. Can you tell me specifically an instant when you were young Do you remember being discriminated against? And if so, can you give me a specific incident, like something that happened to you personally? And how did it make you feel?
I think the most recent was 1979 when the volcano in Europe. When lots of our people during the evacuation period. You know, as soon as lots of our people reaching Georgetown, they were like, "Hey, Carib's running wild. Suffer coming again, suffer a bile," you know. And it was, you know, it was so derogative. Then they're running again, the Caribs, and then the stupid Caribs, they were running. And it was not like 2 hours after, they actually had run more than the Caribs. They were running from the volcano. Yeah, that was one of the last major incident during the 1979 volcano eruption. That was very harsh. When lots of people who were transporting our people from northern side here, crossing the river, when they reach Georgetown, going down, is everybody, the Caribs running wild, the Caribs, you know, to that extent. And so, but many times, when you walk in the street in Kingston, you were quick to point out, and lots of people take it as derogative and why, you know. But to me today, you know, I take it as a plus. When I cross the street and they say, "Carib," you know, because the facts has come to light, you know. And there are many people who live in Kingston now who probably migrate from this era during 1971 volcano eruption and later down 79. And even before that, there's so much people who find themselves in certain position now. They openly now, even than before, that to know that they are Kalinago descendants, they are Garifuna people, you know.
So as a child, you grew up here in Sandy Bay. Was
Yes.
that a pretty protected environment here in Sandy Bay?
From what my grandfather then told me back then, the people, there was a kind of niche together much more. There was they have this kind of keeping that kind of tradition in terms of keeping themselves together as a niche race, as a different race of people. They were much mixed among the Kalinago people. They were much more, Kalinago people were strict. Even back into the early 60s and 50s. You know, you could hardly find a mix between. You know, there were guys between the village, especially my great-grandfather, Boston Sutherland.
Do you remember your great-grandfather or your father or grandfather telling you stories about
My grandfather normally, you know, he used to tell us stories about, you know, fights that they would have with other people who tried to come into the village. You know, black man coming to the village, they would have a fight, they resist and fight. Because that's what they were taught by the British. When they separate them, they taught them that, you know, black people were bad, they were slaves, and they were fighting then. There was a fight between, you know, Sandy Bay people really, or Kalinago people and outside race to come in, even back in the 1950s and the 60s.
So in the other video that I took of you before, you talked about your grandfather and the kind of a life that he had. Can you tell me, you explained to me, but can you explain it again? They had to work several days on...
That's what...
But let me just finish here. Can you explain, you did explain it, but what I need you to say is they worked on other lands, on the master's lands for 2 or 3 days or whatever, and then the other 3 days they worked on their own land, and did they have to pay for their land, or who, you know, or did they rent their land, or how did that work?
Well, the story that my grandfather told me, right, that he was telling stories of people who didn't, when the British exiled the Garifuna people, all right, the remainders, right, had fled, some fleeing to Greg, and some actually has pushed back as far as up to Over Fancy, and an area up in the mountains called Daimo. That's where lots of our people ended up and so. But there were people who actually didn't went up to Daimo. They remained in an area called Magam. just before you pass overland. And they were actually, after the lands were sold in England, and Action and who bought them in England bought who were living on the lands at the time. Those who remaining on the land, they were then asked to work as plantation workers for 3 days. You know, they were working actually to live on the land. You work 3 days, you remain living on the land, and the other 2 days you work to get something to go by, for food or whatever, you know. But those people who were living in Magum, they actually were the ones who were really being put under those kind of pressure. But these people who were living in Daimon were living as free people. Because,
so the ones that were living on the lands, they didn't get paid in any way?
No, they actually were working probably 3 days. They were working as, you know, like those 3 days is for you to stay on the land, to live on the land. And the other 2 days you work, I will give you something to eat. That's what the arrangement probably was at that time.
So the 3 days they worked on the land was sort of their rent?
Right, for keeping occupants of the land, you know.
So they were actually like, they were renting the lands that were their land?
I don't think they were land, they were rent. There was some agreement that who actually bought their own lands from them. Although they were living on the lands, the land belonged to them. They sold off the land in England as in an auction sale. Who bought the land in England then sold over the land back to some plantation owners. They actually take the people who they bought on the land one time and then make an agreement with them off their own land that you work with me 3 days to stay on the land, and 2 days then you get something to eat.
Okay, I understand that. And then you were talking about that some of the Caribs were not exiled. Some of the Garifuna, some went to Baliso, but some did not.
No, there's some who actually they didn't catch. They actually end up in a mountain in Greg's, and some end up in a mountain up in Daimon.
So with the British, with all their soldiering and all the troops that came here,
I think they managed to hide themselves, you know, until the abolition of slavery. You know, then they actually there were no more slavery back in them times. Then people began to live back, you know, in society as we will say, you know. But they was very skeptical still. You know, they were living but keeping on the edge all the time.
So how many years was it between the time that they were exiled and the time that the slavery ended?
I think in 1797 and 1833, that would be roughly around 36 years. Yeah. But the slave trade actually started in 1804. 1804, the trading of slave had stopped. You know. And I think that's the same time, over 4 years after Haiti get its independence. You know. But
can you just say, you know, that they hid in the mountains for about 30 years? And
yes, yeah, roughly.
Wait, hold on. Wait till I'm finished, and then you can start, because I don't want my voice in it. So can you just say roughly, you know, that they roughly hid in the mountains on the edge of society for about 30 years until slavery ended? Would you say that?
Yeah, we can say that really. You know, they actually hid in the mountains really, in the mountains of Greg's and in the mountains of Daimon for about 30 years until the abolition of slavery. They live at the edge until they mesh themselves back into society. You know.
Perfect. And then once slavery ended, then what happened?
I think then came the period of indentured servants, where they bring people from India to work on the plantations now. And with whatever Africans were here still, you know, black people who were here, who were during slavery time. After they free them, and so some of them went back to work on the plantation still, but this time earning a living. And many of our people to find themselves probably meshing in society and know them working as part of that. Some were still free people, who just were farming, fishing and hunting, and they never anticipate to work on any plantation or as such.
So one of the things that a friend of mine who watched the film said, and he's African American from Atlanta, you might meet him this weekend, and he wanted to know, he didn't understand, okay, so if all of the black Caribs were gone and exiled, what's the population of St. Vincent today? Where do the black people that are here today, where did they come from?
Many of them actually, after the black people, the black Caribs or the Garifuna people were exiled, then I think those plantation owners then began to bring in slaves. Because although there were slaves there was always a struggle with those that was here and the Garifuna people. A lot of them has run away and joined the Garifuna people fighting as free men. You know, there were always trouble between the plantation owners and the Garifuna people. There were actually a civil war going on during the period of time. And I could remember in my research in London, there was one plantation owner who has wrote the governor, them back, Sir William Young, stating that in order for them to really walk the lands, this fertile land, this rich land, and gain a benefit from it, that they have to do something. They would have to get rid of these people, because they were constant fighting, burning of fields, burning of things. People were fighting and struggling because they are the plantation coming in more, cutting more land, taking the lands and things and so on. They were fighting. There was a struggle between these people and Garifuna people, the Carib people, you know. So actually, in that letter, he wrote that okay, it's either we the people, the plantation go, or either these people go. So they were actually in 1795, he wrote that letter. 2 years before the exiled people. That letter was written to Sir Young, William Young, you know what I mean, stating that we need to get rid of these people here, because these people here are causing trouble. So they actually decided they're going to get rid of these people by any means and any cause, and they had actually bring them more battle and they bring more men, and you know, although they were fighting 25-year guerrilla warfare in 1762 to 1797, they were constant fighting between a period of time.
So a large group of people were exiled. The Garifuna were exiled.
Yes, large group. Some managed to escape, you know.
So what?
Because there is no record and no historical fact to say that the other chief, Duvalier, was ever captured. No, there is no account of where Duvalier went. Even myself, I've gone, I don't know, probably might have to go now to France, in some museum or archive in France, to get more information, because Duvalier being a French name, you probably might find much more information. There is no account. You could only hear account of Chatoyer and his chief advisor, who actually were on the ship, who were taken to TV Ramos, who was on the ship and then taken to Raton. They didn't know he was Joseph Chatoyer chief advisor. And he was the guy who actually pulled the people in Raton together and then get them organized themselves and then went to mainland Belize. TV Ramos. He was a chief advisor to Joseph Chatoyer. He ended up in Belize. He was on that ship with one of Joseph Chatoyer's daughters.
Okay, so here's the question I have. Why do you think the British didn't let everybody die on Belize? So why do you think that they allowed some people to live and went to the expense of taking them to Central America?
There is a story go around that I think that the British has paid the Americans $5 million to assist in exiling the Garifuna people. They actually has used American ships to help them guide these Garifuna people from Baliso to Jamaica, off Jamaica coast, and then to there were payment. There were actually a $5 million payment that were paid to the Americans from the British to help exile and vanish these people.
Why?
I don't know. The question still remains why? Why did the Americans stand because the Americans were then, they were already independent. They were an independent nation. But the question still remains why? You know, everybody asks why did the British then didn't kill them and then exile? You know? But their intention all along was to kill them, was to get rid of these people completely. Because, you know, there were bits and pieces of story that were going around that they were actually putting white lime in flour when there was Baliso. They actually gave them white lime in flour to eat in Baliso. So they were actually killing them slowly. They were actually poisoning them. Whether this is facts, I don't know. But, you know, along in your research, you would find little stories now and again about these kinds of things that happen. You know, their intention was to get rid of these people, but the people were so resilient that they have to find another way. They can't just kill all of them so without the world go and you know, unseen.
Okay. Can you explain to me about after they were exiled, the people who were left behind? Can you tell me about Can you tell me more about how the culture died, and how the language and the music and the dance and everything, did everything die? If not, what survived and how did it die?
I think everything didn't really die. There are certain things that remained, you know, certain things that they hold on to, you know, like, you know, certain foods and things and so like that to an extent, you know, and
like what foods? Like
the cassava, you know, the plantain, things like that, and so, you know, let's say the cassava, which is the main source, the main staple food for them. They actually had hold on to that, the baking of it, the way how to do it, and things like that, and so, you know, that actually had remained with them. The fishing, the hunting, they had keep these things really, because today we could still find out lots of Kalinago people are very skillful fishermen and hunters, you know, and farmers to an extent. You know, lots of the women who back in those days too, they were actually doing the farming, and today you will still find quite a lot of Garifuna women, Kalinago women that doing farming. You know, I don't know if it's something that they actually took upon themselves, but you know, some of these are the things that they really keep still. You know.
How did they lose their language then?
The language was loose, you know, because after the British has really take hold of the land, and they actually, those after slavery and those who was mingled back into society, there were one village called Old Sandy Bay. There were a few people who were speaking the language still, but not fluent. They were forbidden to speak it. When they were in crowds, they were even allowed to really walk as crowd. If one were walking here, they were spreading them out if they're doing work. So there were no really kind of interaction, but you know, so to speak, like using their own language. They were only taught English, and even today we can't even speak English properly. It's a broken thing that we were taught by the English, you know. My grandfather told me a story that his grandfather said that they were beaten when they were walking together, even they were walking in crowds in the street. They would separate them, you know. They were actually telling a story about this guy who was riding on the horse coming through the village and thing, and so, and you know, like separate the children even couldn't play together. They were scattering them, they were running them, things like that also, you know. Yeah, they weren't allowed to really think. If they were to really communicate, they probably have to go in the bush or something like that, but not in public. So lots of them was so frightened that they don't even want to speak their language to their children, and then lots of them die with it. They never really pass it on to the children.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you. That explains it well.
Yeah.
Okay. What about like the other kinds of stuff? Are there any remnants of ritual, dance, or anything in the home that is practiced that you can trace back to your ancestors?
Not really, you know. Not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
So, what is being done to reintroduce the culture back into?
Well, in 2001, we had a very famous Belizean artist, Pen Caetano, who came to St Vincent with a very good friend of mine, Chatoyer. He's a Vincentian but living in London and so on. They actually had came, and Pen has really come on a journey. He had done something on the Garifuna journey. He had done a painting with the journey of the Garifuna people, and they were going around in schools, a couple of schools in my area, and well, around that time we had a group together, and he actually was teaching us dancing and drumming and things like that, and so on. One of the things that he did really in 2001 was light a fire, really, you know, a spiritual fire. You know, he light a flame, and while telling the story, there was an enthusiasm among the young people that back then, that, you know, they had come in connection with this master drummer, with Pen Caetano, Belizean, this man who actually who's part of our ancestral, you know, one of our brother, you know, so to speak, and so, you know, and when Pen came, you know, he light that fire, and he has raised an awareness then among the young people in this village here. And then we start doing some drumming with Pen and dancing. So we actually start doing a little bit of the drums, the Garifuna drumming, and a lot of the dancing, like the punta and the jankano and so on thing. And so, you know, today there's still a little bit of that still going on in the village now, that Pen light the fire. I think the fire is still blazing, but not to the fullest as it should be, you know. I hope by next year, you know, that probably the fire should be blazing again, you know. Yeah.
What year did Pen Caetano come? How old?
2001. I was about 34, somewhere around there.
How did you feel? How did it make you feel to have somebody from outside come in?
But when I get the news, was from Dr. Fraser that he had Pen Caetano, this Belizean artist who was coming here and so on. He needed me to host them for a week, and so I said, a week, that's just good, man. You know what I mean? And you know, it was like, you know, I was expecting something to happen. I was anticipating, yeah, something should happen, you know. And then when Pen came, and then something did happen, you know, the firelight, and, you know, we had this thing going and so on. So for the past 10, 11 years now, you know, there's actually little bits and pieces that's happening, like with the punta, the jankano, the music, things like that. And so, well, 2005, yeah, when the group from Honduras came, you know, it was a plus for us, really, you know, because the excitement that we had already built from Pen, you know, it gave us this kind of inner spirit now that this is, you know, this is our thing, you know. And if more, we need to really embrace it more when we see the dance on the stage, especially you guys them doing the jankano. You know, when they were portraying the jankano on the stage and thing, and so, you know, you could have feel the vibes. This is not just an ordinary thing. This is something beyond ordinary, you know. And I think we had kind of embraced it more, that, you know, because we start seeing more of this thing, really, in not just hearing the stories, but we actually seeing what happening from the story. And we are kind of embrace that and know that, yeah, you know, this is our thing, you know, and whatever came out from that day, you know, we kind of know that, you know, somewhere along the line, probably, that this is our thing, and we definitely, you know, we have to get back this thing, you know, this thing is a part of us. Yeah.
So is it happening? Is the language being reintroduced? Is the dance music? Can you...
About 2 or 3 years ago, there was a lady came to teach the language in the school. She probably spent about maybe 2 or 3 months, but it didn't really pick up. I think it need more time, really. 2 or 3 months was a little too late, really, among the was in the primary and the secondary school, You know, you need somebody on the ground probably about 2 or 3 years. Then you will start making a difference in terms of the language and so. Yeah.
When I was here last, you talked about getting a video to do that. Is there any effort?
No, we didn't get the video. We didn't get the video because the link page really, somewhere along the line, we lost connection with some of our people really.
What do you mean?
Making the contact with those who are responsible in organizing the video. We actually has lose contact with them and so, you know.
Were they here on island or off island?
They were off island at the time, you know.
So you're saying that somebody from St. Vincent or outside?
Outsiders. There were some guys from Belize who really, you know, who were interested in assisting us and so, but we have loose connection with them.
What about efforts here on this island? Any government efforts or education?
I don't think no effort such as from the government part, from the Ministry of Education part. That lady, she came in, I think on the radio station, the Garifuna radio station that we have set up here, from their initiative that she had came in. She was speaking a little bit on the radio too, you know, on mornings and something. So, but sometimes if you have more than one person to teach it, then you probably might pick it up more fast when you have an interaction. Cause.
Do you have a Garifuna radio station now?
Yeah, but it's just played more English thing. There's a Garifuna FM. The radio station came out of UN. Some funding that came from UN. It was set up by a couple of people. I think it was 2001, 2002, somewhere around that period of time. Well, it's only its namesake radio, really, Garifuna FM 98.7 or something like that. But there's nothing Garifuna going on it. There's not a single thing as Garifuna going on it, you know.
So how do you feel about the idea of repair then? I mean, reconnecting with the Garifuna culture. How do you feel it's going on, and you know what?
I think the connection already been made, basically between the people of St Vincent and those living in the diaspora in terms of Belize, Honduras, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and even to an extent in North America. You know, the connection is there really, but somewhere along the line, we as a people, we need to pull ourselves together. You know, and you know, because sometimes government can't do it for you. We have to do it. We have to kind of make a move ourselves. You know, government sometimes could only open up ways, but then if we're not, you know, willing to do, then it didn't make any sense. We have to have this kind of inspiration. We have to have this kind of fire, you know, inside of it. The Garifuna people are really fire people, you know. They're fire, spiritual people, really, you know. And then if the fire ain't burning in way, then, you know, it ain't happening. You know, I think the fire got to blaze both ways. In St Vincent and in the diaspora, in Belize, in Honduras, the fire got to blaze. The people got to connect. The fire's got to connect. The fire's got to connect and make one large fire, and things will happen. But the fire ain't connecting some way, somewhere along the lines. Is the fire blazing there, blazing there? The fire is separate. We need to get the fire come together. You know what I mean? And let this thing work. Yeah.
You need a big bonfire.
A big bonfire. Yeah. We do. You know?
So what do
I mean, there's lots of people who really, you know, like myself, who really would love the day when this thing happen, when we start speaking the language, when we start doing the spiritual dances, when we start having our own spiritual leader, when things like this start happening, you know. Dream of that day, you know, when this connection could happen, when we could have 200-300 Belizeans living here, you know, having, you know what I mean, honorary citizenship here, when we could have 200-300 children from here living in Belize, schooling in Belize, you know what I mean, you know.
So
I would love that day when we could have a kind of exchange like that, that we know for certain that we start doing something in terms of reviving the culture and the language and everything there within.
Okay, that's well said. Now, what about National Heroes Day? There's a big conference now this week. How do you feel about the conference?
Well, I only heard about the conference on the radio and things like that, and so, but, we welcome any conference like that once it involves the people directly. The people who are in the struggle, the people who the struggle is for, and the people who suffered during the period of time. I welcome this, who are still suffering now too. I welcome when they have these conferences and these people are involved. And I welcome the day when they stop hosting these conferences in Kingston, when they bring them to the people, when they bring them out to where the Garifuna people, to the Kalinago people, the ancestors live. I welcome the day when they bring these conferences out. Why having these conferences in town? When the Kalinago people living in Greg's, in Rosebank, and in Sandy Bay. What are they trying to achieve in town? You need to have the conference in Sandy Bay, you need to have it in Greg's, you need to have it in Rosebank. These are the places that the conference is supposed to be held, not in Kingston. You know what I mean? Bring the people out, let the people out here benefit from these conferences. Let the people know what's happening, let people on the ground, Because these conferences are only organizing for the medias and people who live in town. People in the country, people who basically are the people, the Kalinago, the ancestors, from where the Garifuna people come from. These people, there's one or few of them might be in the conference. We welcome conference like this, but they must be held within the Kalinago villages where the Garifuna ancestors come from. This conference is not supposed to be held in town, it's supposed to be held in Greg's, in Rosebank, in Sandy Bay, where the people live, where we know what's going on. Why bringing in our ancestors, our brothers and sisters from Belize and Honduras and all over the world for this conference? And had the conference in Kingston. This conference need to be in touch with the people. It doesn't matter how much people you bring on a conference in Kingston, these people won't feel the same. They have to connect with the people for know, well, yeah, we're home, we're in St Vincent. We belong to this place here. We mingle with our people. Things like that and so. We kind of welcome these conferences, but there's emphasis too much on in Kingston. Conference them need to come out in our villages where the Kalinago people live. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Are you gonna go to the conference? Are you gonna attend it at all, or?
I don't know if it's an open invitation, but I don't think I will be able to make it. What a special invitation.
Were you invited, or?
No, I was not invited. So.
It's in the paper, I guess.
Yeah, I guess on the radio and things. So it's probably open invitation, but I will not be able to make it financially. Because it's a 3 day, and you gotta pay 3 day up and down.
You have to pay what?
Your transportation up and down from Sandy Bay to town on 3 days on the street. If you want to attend the conference for 3 days, then you have to find money from your own pocket. I guess so, Yeah. And then you would probably have to find something to eat. So that's no good for people in this area hosting a conference in Kingston. There's a cost to it. If I want to make a contribution to that conference, then I have to find money, of course, to involve in that conference. Yeah.
What about National Heroes Day? How do you feel about National Heroes Day?
Well, we basically were among the first set of people who were actually fighting for it. For March 14 to declare as National Heroes Day, and to an extent that we were marching from Kingston, Sign Hill to Dashter Hill with the National Youth Council many years before 2001 when it declared National Heroes Day. And I think 1997 we actually started celebrating it, National Heroes Day in Sandy Bay. We start putting off our own rally. We actually start about 3 or 4 years before we declare National Heroes Day. to celebrate it as national heroes.
So how is it, is there going to be a celebration
In Sandy Bay this year?
this year?
No, I think the celebration will be taking place in Fancy. There's a group of farmers in Fancy, they call it Farmers Group, who actually for the past 5 years now been celebrating it over there. We actually had stopped celebrating it about 4 or 5 years. We actually, because of funding, really, we actually, with the Ministry of Tourism, who used to sponsor us and fund tourism and culture back then, around that time, 2 or 3 years, 4 years ago really, in fact, they actually had split the money that they used to put in the Sandy Bay rally and put half of the money into a rally in Fancy on the same day. So we felt necessary that, you know, I mean, if you split the money to have 2 rally in one basically 1 area, Fancy is just, you know, a couple of miles overhead, you know what I mean, celebrating nationally. That ain't make any sense, you know what I mean. So we actually had cut out the rally. We just say like we should let everything go Fancy. But I don't know, I don't know, one of these days we might eventually decide to have something back and a massive rally, because our rally was really building up strong, getting people coming in from Belize and Honduras and, you know, things like that. And so there was a connection there that we were actually involved with people coming in and performing for us. I would really like the day come when we would be able to speak our language, you know. And though today we as Kalinago people, you know, Carib people, Garifuna people, you know, whatever, you know, terms they may want to say, you know, that we had this sense of pride that we could dance our dance on the street, we could talk our talk, our language, I mean, we could sing our songs, our traditional song in our traditional tongue, you know, that our children could play games in our language, you know what I mean. I welcome that day, you know. I welcome the day when we could bring all this together and once and for all, you know, see ourselves as, you know, as a tribe of people, you know, a tribe of people, the Kalinago people, you know what I mean, the ancestors of the Garifuna people, you know what I mean. You know, when we come together, you know, I had a friend, Penn, who once told me that I come to St Vincent not as a black Carib, you know, not as a Garifuna man, but I come to seek my ancestors, the Kalinago people. You know, he says, from there, my people come from, the Kalinago people. Penn emphasis on the Kalinago people was very strong. He was putting the Kalinago people first, you know, because he know that's where the Garifuna people came from, you know. And I feel like, you know, one day when we stop separating ourselves as the Kalinago and Garifuna and see ourselves as a nation of people, you know, especially our ancestors, Joseph Chatoyer, Duvalier, you know, they see this island as Yurume, as a nation people. They actually signed a treaty of 1773. A nation of people, they signed as a nation. Only nation alone signed treaty. And when the Garifuna people sign treaty, they sign it as a nation. And I will like the day when those who are exiled and those who live in here see ourselves as a nation of people. The Garifuna nation, the Kalinago nation, Yurume, our homeland. And the day when we start speaking our language again. Yeah, that's my dream. When my children could call one another in Garifuna. When they could sing songs in Garifuna. You know, yeah, when they see themselves as a nation of people, there were no separation. You know, there were no black Caribs, there were no yellow Caribs, there were no Carib, there were no Kalinago, there were no Garifuna, they were one nation, Euromanian people. Yeah, and I would like to see the day when we recognize that. Unless we recognize that, you know, it won't mesh, the fire won't come together. We have to first recognize that we are a nation of people. And we must, you know, we have to stop, separate, you know, ourselves. So the Kalinago are the ones who produce the Garifuna. They must know that. They must know the Kalinago are the ones who then came the Garifuna people. Yeah, until they recognize that, then we ain't reaching no way. The fires got to mesh together, the fires separating too much. And then press in the pan. Right.
So tell me, what are you doing now in terms of reintroducing the culture back into?
Personally, I am embarking now and trying to bring an awareness among my children themselves, really. What I'm doing now is we are looking for lots of information culturally, music, dance, and we normally be on the net all the time, you know, looking at the dances that are happening in Belize, like the punta, you know, the jankanu. So I'm kind of filling my children them head now with a lot of these, you know, instead of watching movies and things like that. I'll allow them now to take in lots of this, you know, lots of our Garifuna traditional dances, the jankanu, the punta, you know, anything coming out from Belize concerning the Garifuna culture and heritage. That's what I'm into now. So I'm kind of preparing my children that whenever that we start to do dance and music again, that they're ready, they understand this thing, they know this thing belonging to them, and they know they're part of this thing. So I'm kind of doing this drive now, so bringing the awareness to my kids that they know who they are and that they're not out there looking for identity. They can identify themselves as Garifuna people, Kalinago people, you know what I mean? That's what I am doing right now, preparing my kids them for that journey, the journey to recover our heritage and culture.